Hello there and welcome to another room in my parents' house complete with cat. I am in my sister's childhood bedroom. Again, it doesn't look like it. This is the room where I filmed lots of videos around 2007. Anyway, the reason why I'm in this room is because this is my sort of temporary, but it's supposed to be my eventual bedroom. Point is, it's a new location. The lighting is awful. As I film this, my hair is static because I'm touching it too much, and I'm not using a tripod with a base. So although my camera is on this tripod currently, the chances are it's going to fall off at some point, so please bear with me. Anyway, the point of today's video is to talk about cloning. So if you don't know me, hi, I'm Rebecca. What an intro. I have been doing cloning photos and videos going back nearly 20 years. So there was a point where I had a twin sister, Jennifer, but for the most part there's just been multiple versions of myself in tons of content spanning nearly 20 years of my life. Anyway, in spring of 2024, I sort of stated the following. A long time ago I stopped creating clone photos to a particular standard because I exhausted the subject matter. I was bored. I felt like I'd done everything. It's frustrating when you feel like you've hit, not a ceiling, but you've reached the top of the mountain and you just don't know where to go. You get bored. But despite the fact I said that, I think cloning is still something that I will always eventually go back to and do stuff to. What is this fly doing? We have another cat. Anyway, this year I have been inspired. Re-inspired? I have ended up editing an excessive amount of clone photos this year. I've taken a few new ones, but I have also re-edited and edited new versions of old photos. So for your viewing pleasure, today I'm going to go through some of these and talk through them. So for context, this is the sort of stuff I was doing back in 2007. They are quite pixelated and somewhat cringy. I mean, all of this, I guess you could say, could be cringy. It's self-portraiture, you know, and we change over time. But yes, this was me nearly 2 decades ago, doing clone stuff, and over time it sort of progressed like this, and gradually it got more complicated. The quality of the cameras that I was using got better as well, so that made it harder to clone, and I do think that the quality of cameras did contribute to my frustrations and the longevity of the process. So I'm going to start with this one. There's a photo from 2014 that I never completed because it just took so long to edit, and here it is. You've never seen this before. It's not even uploaded yet anywhere. This is 2014. This was taken rather spontaneously, as many of my photos are, in a university dorm location, and there was no one there at the time, and I didn't have very long, so it was quite fast. I got what I needed done. Anyway, the amount of editing, and it's not just the editing that you see, it never is. All the lines that you think are there are not necessarily where I've cut, but the complications with how it's not just the body parts you're seeing in these photos either, it's the shadows or it's the reflection. Sometimes it's not even a clear reflection like a window or something. It's in the sheen of silk paint or something. Anyway, this was a really big one to complete because I technically started it 10 years ago. So it's finally done. Took 10 years. So as some of you know, I've done lots of kayaking the last couple of years or so, and this year I tried to do some clone kayaking stuff. Now it stemmed from this photo. I created this summer, and I didn't know I was going to create this when I was doing this. Basically, somebody who I thought was filming me was taking tons of photos, and I was able to compile those photos together to create this, and with a bit of AI and editing in the top left-hand corner, top right-hand corner, you can see I've done something there. I was able to put it all together like this, and I'm so happy with the outcome, considering this wasn't even planned. That was a big thing to complete, but then I started getting a bit more creative, like on purpose. This one is more complicated than it looks, so I was trying to roll in specific places on the water so that I could then cut myself together. However, when I got into editing it became more complicated because I didn't factor in the water, not the water that I was sitting upon, the moving water, so the splashes of water around the paddles. So thank goodness for AI, I just played around until something looked even a little bit realistic. Which leads me to the next topic, and that is AI. So this is the first year where I have used AI in any of my stuff. I was quite reluctant to use it, and even now it's a big topic, but there's been a few basic things I've used it for. But even the idea of AI and the stuff that I was able to do, and even some non-clone photos, it's almost frustrating that people have the ability to do things in seconds that could have taken me hours, if not days and weeks in some cases. Another thing that's been quite frustrating to use is the remove background feature, because if it's super simplistic then okay, but I found it quite frustrating sometimes because it doesn't factor in everything, and the amount of times that it doesn't cut around my glasses properly and there's bits of them missing and then you have to go in and fiddle around with it a bit more. So I still am a rotoscoper, if you know what that means. I cut round myself. I sometimes blur, it depends how complicated they are, but I usually cut. This was a fun session. So in the summer I ended up going swimming and I was allowed to have my camera in the water, which is an amazing thing. And also in the last 2-3 years or so I've been using my phone in a waterproof case under the water. Hello. And I have been able to take photos and videos in a way that I never have in my lifetime, and it's been incredible, like the amount of kayaking footage I have captured in the last couple of years under the water. But as for clone photos, focus, I managed to create a couple of these and I was happy with the outcome, aside from the fact that I look like a smurf. Everything is so blue, which is what it looks like under the water, and if I tried to colour grade it, it didn't look quite right. It was just so blue. And I used a bit of AI in terms of creating bubbles. Something funny about these photos in particular is that when I open my eyes under the water, I can't see. So I could see the glow of my phone on the floor perhaps, but I couldn't see where to put my eye lines. So I tried my best and I think it came out okay. I didn't think it would work, but it just about works. I'm gonna go a bit more serious now. So at the start of the year, I created this and this, but it was this one. This was the big one. I'm quite melancholy and my hair is dark, but that is me, and that was at the start of the year. And then I also did this one. This was more of a test. What I did was I filmed on this camera, the one I'm using, and just posed around for a couple of minutes. And then I stitched it together by taking screenshots of various poses, but when you do that you then lose the quality on the camera and it's not as crisp as a DSLR. It's better than, say, webcams from the noughties, but it's not brilliant, but at a push, it's okay. So later in the year, when I then went on holiday and took my camera with me, I did loads of spontaneous cloning photos in that way, and you can see that the quality isn't as good as the DSLR, but it's not bad. In some cases I had seconds to create these, so I'm quite happy with these, despite what they look like. There was a point earlier this year where I tried to do a clone video snippet. So in a vlog I put Jennifer in the background, and this sequence you're seeing right now, I know it's quite short, but it took me 3 hours to edit. There's still a jump, which frustrates me. It's not perfect, but 3 hours! And it's so complicated because you've got the light switch, you've got the flick of the light, which you then have to add into the reflection. The reflection behind me caused problems. When I sat down to vlog, I didn't intend to do a clone snippet, and if I had intended to do so, from the time I sat down I wouldn't have done it in front of a mirror. But when I did do it, I was aware, so I tried to move in a particular way that I could rotoscope around myself. But yeah, 3 hours that took. I am so out of practice. Oh, I need to go there. Oh wow. All this for a clone that you can't even see. Here is another one I did this year that I've been quite proud of, and in summary, I did this whilst I was being watched by my team, and I used AI and my own paintwork to extend the kayak at the bottom. I, in theory, had a thinner image and sort of extended it and moved the clone holding the kayak across over to widen it up, but then the kayak at the bottom, it wasn't over enough, so I really had to play around to get it to extend, and you can't tell considering what I had to work with. Here's some other ones that I have done this year, but I've waffled about some of the ones that I regard more important. Flapping hands. So let's go back in time a bit more. Let's just forget about 2024, some of the ones that I've gone back and re-edited. So this is from 2023. I've done lots of photos like this in my timeline of cloning, so this is very easy. And it's just a case of splicing someone else in a different reflection, and not many people will notice it, but once you see it, you can't unsee it, so there we go. This is actually 2 screenshots of a video of me dealing with a migraine. What I did was I rotoscoped around the one that's close to the camera and then extended her over, so I've actually made it much wider than it was, so I'm proud of that. Not that you'd know that. Ah, Magical Scotland. This is super easy cloning, so you just rotoscope down the middle, but actually sometimes it gets more complicated because in the time it takes for you to go from one clone to the other, the shadows of foliage can move, the light can change, so even though you think it's going to be a line down the centre between the two, isn't always the case. Sometimes you still have to rotoscope round. So this one I'm about to show you is a bit of a silly one. So here I am in 2022, my mum took several photos of me and you can see that I flipped round some of the clones perhaps. And there's been a lot of work with the grass. Grass can be one of those things that is a nightmare with photography and cloning because it moves so easily. It's so easy for a photo to be disturbed, and all the extra editing you have to do with grass. So now I'm going to go back into 2021. So these are photos that I took with the intention to clone, but I just didn't get around to it. Or I started it, abandoned it for whatever reason. My sister's home. The one with the arch, I actually had to rotoscope around myself entirely because the camera moved too much in between shots because I wasn't using a tripod. This one was difficult because I took it again without a tripod. I'm superimposing myself on top of an image that probably wouldn't work. So again, it looks like a simplistic edit, but it's not. This clone photo here is one that I actually forgot I took, and I was really excited to find it. I know it's basic, and this is an example of one of the ones where removing the background didn't work with the glasses. I had to go back in and edit the glasses. I'm not even sure if I've got the edited one here. No. See, the glasses are missing, can you see? Got to go back in. This one I've debated whether or not to include because this is one of the ones where I played with AI. Like, I've really gone in and played. So I took this at the time, I had a version of it at the time that I lost, but I went in and re-edited. But I don't know if you can see, the clones have different hair lengths, and this isn't due to wigs. In some of my old photos, the hair lengths are different due to wigs, but this is not. I used AI to extend the hair on the clone on the right hand side. I also used AI to change the clothes themselves, so the skirt, the top. I tried to do jewellery, I think I added jewellery. This was one of those days where it truly blew my mind what AI could do, and if I don't point out the things that I've done, then you probably won't know. I think I should also mention that all the clouds here are AI. It's blaringly obvious to me, maybe it's not to you, but they are. I don't know if I feel comfortable with it. And then the last thing is the shadows on the ground. So shadows, I mentioned grass earlier, shadows can also be a nightmare to edit with, especially if the sun is quite low in the sky and they're moving quite fast. You've got to take your photos super fast to keep up with it. This one annoys me. There's clones of my mum in the background, if you can see. Now we're going to go back to 2020. Here we go. Right, so 2020, lockdown, COVID. I did take clone photos, but inside my brain, because of the world that we were living in at that time, it just didn't seem appropriate to be enjoying myself at any time during the lockdowns, but also to create content, even if it was just for myself. Like, I wasn't monetizing this. Like, I've not really monetized my clone photos in the past because I put them on Facebook. Anyway, I didn't like the idea of just posting stuff. So I waited, and then I waited so long that I ended up not sharing. So 4 years after taking these photos, I went back in and I edited them, and it was bizarre. So this photo here, it's way more complex than it looks, because if you look at the tire, I had to go through and edit that shadow, so where the lines are connecting the wheel together. I spent hours doing that. It was exhausting, and I think the final result is okay, just. But as for the photo itself, you know, forget the editing for a moment. That was in the height of the first lockdown, and bikes were forbidden in that area of the town, but because there was no one there, I willed it through. I think at the time I took this, there were some people shouting right down the end. I remember being uncomfortable and deciding not to go further down. I would have taken more photos, but yeah, it was just a peculiar day that. This is a different day during 2020. This is a month after the previous photo, and it was important to me to take photos there because this was my workplace, and my workplace was closed due to COVID, and I wanted to document that. Like, this was a super busy street and it was all shut down, so I took a couple of photos. And then the clone on the left hand side that's nice and big, that was actually more of a selfie from a different angle, and I've put her in over the top, and I think it just about works. There were other things in this photo that were rather hard to edit. So for example, all the lines behind me. I didn't have a tripod, I was using a mobile phone, so I ended up having to rotoscope around the clone on the far right hand side and really play around with not just the rotoscoping because the quality was so low, but the lines and the shadows. There's a lot of paint work in there to make it work. And where it sort of loses it is around the feet. So I had to add the shadows in, and the foot on the left hand side of that clone on the right hand side is not good, but in the distance when it's smaller you can't quite see. It's not too bad. This is the start of June of 2020. I was just playing around and being silly. Here are some others I haven't finished yet. This one and this one were shot in the car park of one of my workplaces that was closed at the time. And we get to these, which I am happy to have in existence, like some sort of documentation of that time, or that time for me, what things were like. I'm happy with how these came out, considering how poor quality the video footage is. Again, it's all on my Samsung mobile from, I think, 2019, 2018. This is right at the start of 2020. This is me actually doing my job interview and doing a presentation board that was inside the shop in a short time frame. It's also really weird looking at myself in that photo in particular because it just feels like a lifetime ago. Like that person was me at the start of 2020. In theory, that is more 2019 me rather than 2020. It was January of 2020, but life has changed so much in nearly 5 years. When we get into the 2010s, it gets a bit more complicated in terms of me talking about stuff, but here we go. When I talk about having edited different variations of old photos, here is one that I posted in 2019, and then here is the one that I re-edited in 2024. So same day, different photos. So in 2018, I travelled to Poland. I was invited to do a talk at an event in Warsaw, and I stayed there for a couple of extra days, and during that time, I explored it to my heart's content, and I took a ton of clone photos. But almost immediately after returning from that trip, I started a relationship with somebody, and so my time just went up in smoke, as did the next 6 years. So earlier this year, I said to myself, right, I'm gonna go through, let's get these done and dusted. That, I can't even believe, is me. Did I ever look like that? This photo was so frustrating to edit. Again, it's sometimes the most simplest photos that are the most complicated. It was complicated because of all the people in the background. Not just people, but pigeons. The amount of pigeons that I had to edit out and edit in. You can barely see any pigeons, but when you zoom in, they are there. Here are some others I did in Warsaw. This is another one I've given up on for now. It's just so much editing for so little payoff. This photo as well was quite frustrating because there was a lady in a pink shirt that was walking around in the background as I was shooting these. So actually, although I had to edit all these clones together, I had to edit out the lady with the pink shirt. So you can't see her, she doesn't exist in this, but she was there in the editing process. Okay, 2017, woohoo! This clone photo was tricky because the sun kept going in and out, and certain things I had to change. So the white headphones of the clone on the left hand side aren't there. I had to use AI to add the wire back in. I tried clone stamping. I would prefer to use clone stamping than AI, but it didn't work. So the clone at the back with her arms extended, she was actually much closer to the frame, and I wanted to move her further back. It felt better. But with many photos, what happens is when you take a high definition photo and try to scale it down, it looks too sharp. It just looks different. There's something different about it. So I've tried my best to reduce the quality. Also, I've tried to move them around so you can actually see the landmark behind me, because sometimes I end up covering it by mistake. So this photo was so complicated, and it took hours and a touch of AI. It wasn't a case of doing a line down the middle. Again, I had no tripod. I used the pod beam thing that I have been using for at least 15 years, and the camera moved slightly, but not only that, everything in the frame moved. The trees moved, the reflections on the circles behind me, they moved. There were people in the background. There was just so much that had to be cut around and added, and for those of you who love AI, just go in and see, because there's a few tiny bits. Those trees do not exist. I'm happy with the outcome, but the amount of effort it took to achieve that. So these are some photos that I took in 2016, and the summary is, as you can see, if you flick backwards and forwards between the two, the bed extends. I wasn't intending on turning them into clone photos, but as I was flicking through and I was editing everything back into this folder I could see that I could do it. So I tried, and it worked. The hardest part, I'm just going to be brief about this, was the feet. Making sure that the feet and the shadows were okay. 2015 is probably where I started to lose momentum with cloning. There's not that many in 2015 that I could find, because also I took more close-up photos of myself in 2015. It's hard to put yourself on top of things, and I know that there was some photos I took in early 2015 that I did clone at the time. I haven't yet re-cloned them. I want to re-edit them, but here's the one I edited back in 2015. There was a few in 2014 that I did for the first time. This is another one of those mirror photos where you can't see that something's been edited necessarily. There's just a couple here that I worked hard on. This one I went in and re-edited, and you won't notice the small edits if you were to compare the two together unless I really point them out, but it's weird to think that that was 10 years ago. 10 solid years. Ah! And then before 2014, I feel like I edited the bulk of the stuff that I shot. So what I ended up doing was I ended up, as I said, re-editing versions of photos that I'd already posted. So as you can see here, here are just some of those, which might look familiar perhaps if you've gone through my folders, but they are slightly different. There's just loads of them just popping up on screen because I can't talk about all of them individually. I have to say that this has been very odd for me today. I've been quite bouncy. It's the first time I've gone through my photos like this. I probably should have done this many years ago and I didn't. I just talked about other stuff. I didn't say, hey, I've done this photo and this photo and this photo. I just put them online. I put them on Tumblr or Facebook. So I've been quite nervous doing this, shoving my face in all its variations on screen. Between the years of 2008 and 2012, the majority of my photos were taken by a photo booth, and the quality was a lot lower than the photo booths that we have today, and so I could get away with a lot more stuff that I couldn't today. The quality of things sort of hid stuff. But it also makes it more frustrating to edit, and you have to really think about what you're doing, and so 2011 was a hard year to really go through across the board with all the tech stuff I've been doing, but in terms of cloning photos, I did find some to edit. I couldn't believe it, like brand new ones, like ones that had never been done before in any variation, and here's a few of them. Now this one took forever. It's still not perfect, but it took a long time to make it look okay. This was my very first wig. This was the week I got it. It is kind of weird throwing these all up and they're kind of out of context. I'm skipping over the context because my brain just wants to keep it simple today. It was quite funny actually, because in my 2011 folder I actually went through and re-edited photos, exported them and went to upload them to my folders. In some cases I actually re-edited the same variations in the same ways, which was interesting because it proved my brain still works in the way that it did when I was younger. I chose the same photos in the same ways. It happened at least 3 times. So that was a bit of a shock, and that made my brain feel great that I'd forgotten I'd edited something. This one I was happy to find. I don't know how I used to paint in that bedroom like that. That's oil paint. There wasn't much to find in 2009. I think I edited everything I possibly could that year. But then we get to 2008 and this is where I get excited again, because I found photos that I didn't remember taking, or I remember taking but then I lost, such as this. This is me the evening before my Duke of Edinburgh. I think it was my silver, so this is October 2008. I remember at the time taking these photos and thinking maybe in the future I could stitch them together. Like when you see the photos separated, they're not taken from the same angle in the same place, they're not on a tripod, but they could be compiled together. Some of the photos that I have published over the years haven't been published at the time that I took them because I didn't have the technology, but I knew I would at some point. For example, these photos I took in March of 2009, but I didn't edit until maybe 9 or 10 months later. So when I found these, I got excited because I knew that with my current technology I could edit them together. So again, it's not that complex visually, but actually there's a ton of stuff that's gone on here to make it possible. Just makes me very happy, this one. This one isn't special, but this is an example of photos that I lost. These got deleted. These are from April 2008, and I found these 2 photos inside a PowerPoint document in an old backup of a laptop somewhere. And then I could save those, like uncrop them, because I used to edit my photos in PowerPoint, would you believe? I could extend the photos, save them as photos, and then import them into Photoshop and edit them, which is what I did, and this is the outcome. And yes, one of them is slightly blurrier than the other because it is blurry, the actual photo, but these were missing for 16 years. And then we're back to the beginning, 2007. It's weird to think that I used to use Paint to edit. I don't have Paint on this computer, so I can't even open those files, but I've saved them for when I do have a computer. That's another one that wasn't made at the time. That's 2003, 4? Big jump cut, so my battery went flat. This video has been quite long and it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but if you have sat through this and you have enjoyed this, please say hello. I know this is a topic that many people have been asking me about over the years, or even this year. The amount of people that have engaged with my stuff, particularly on Facebook, has been overwhelming, especially as we are nearly 2 decades on now. The novelty of it has definitely worn off. Nowadays it's easy to find so many people doing this, but back in the day there were so few of us. I am grateful to have been re-inspired this year. I've learned a lot going back. As I referenced earlier, I do realise that some of the context might be missing with these photos. Context is important. Other people would argue you don't need context. Just enjoy it, or take it for what it is, or analyse it for what it is. So with or without the context, I hope these photos have sparked something. I'm happy to talk about stuff further downstairs below, especially things I've jumped over. I want to talk about everything that's inside my brain, but if I did that, we'd be here till the end of time. As I'm trying to do my conclusion, Millie is trilling away. Here she is. I love cats, but by golly, Millie is the loudest. Trilling Millie. She should have been a tribble. I will put lots of links in the description box downstairs. And with that, I will bring this video to a close because I am being bombarded by cats that want to go to bed. I will see you downstairs in the comments. Bye bye everyone.